That brings up an interesting, maybe this is a story about me, maybe not, but why does your body start to sweat when you eat a ton of meat?
Well, I think that's person specific too. I think you're referring to the meat sweats.
I've heard it called that in some circles.
Well, so
That's
protein,
something you study in dietitian school.
yeah, actually,
My PhD's in meat sweats.
it could be. It very well could be.
Welcome to the Mops and Mo's podcast. My name is Drew.
And I'm Alex.
Today in episode six, we interview Sam Leyh. So Sam is a dietitian with Air Force Special Warfare. I used to work with her. She is out with the PJs out west. And essentially we brought her on to ask all the questions around what to eat, how to eat, when to eat, what supplements to use, meal timing. And she ripped apart a lot of myths, talked about a lot of things that most people may know, but a lot of people probably don't. And so it's pretty informative.
Lots of good myth busting, lots of practical, common sense, actionable ways to get after it.
A lot of sponsors in this episode too.
All day, gotta make that money.
Exactly. Enjoy. All right, we're live.
We sure are.
So give me a rundown on the MOE thing first, the MO, the Mops and Mo's.
Yeah, actually, so we recorded an episode 0 where we talked about that. But what is Mops and Mo's, Alex?
Sure. And I get this question all the time because it is a super nerdy name for a platform. But MOPS and MOS stands for Measures of Performance and Measures of Effectiveness. Measures of Performance is basically, are we doing the things right? Like the tasks we've been given, the mission we're on, are we doing it the way it's supposed to be done? And then measures of effectiveness are the things we're doing actually getting us closer to the outcomes we want, right? Like you can do a task perfectly and it can still not produce the results you were hoping for. So I think we're pretty good at measuring performance. Like, did we do that task successfully? Did all the blocks on the PowerPoint turn green? Fantastic. I think we're really bad and sometimes unwilling to honestly assess whether the things we're doing are producing the outcomes we wanted in the first place. We spin our wheels a lot and waste a lot of time on tasks that aren't producing the outcomes we want.
So the podcast is pretty high performance, but effectiveness, I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, yeah, no, I like it.
To be determined. I'll have to measure the effectiveness of MOPS and MOS one day.
What is the intent? Are you so similar to kind of your made up, I guess, job title, just connecting people and connecting ideas?
That's honestly pretty close to reality. It like the genesis of it was, I knew there was a lot of like basic information that the Army, like especially like actual service members, didn't have access to in terms of like foundational information on human performance. And I wanted to put it on the U.S. Army Physical Fitness School page when I worked there. Had all these great ideas, but you have to go through like all the hoops of like getting it approved by public affairs, and is it on the appropriate talking points, and like, oh, there's something political going on, so we can't be posting right now, whatever it is. And so I was like, you know what, like screw it, I'll do it myself. So made my own page, and that's where it came from. It's honestly just to like get basic information out to people.
Yeah.
Post videos of them working out
once in a while.
I mean, those
you get the likes and the followers.
As you said, those get the most engagement. So
it is weird how like videos that are less than 10 seconds long seem to be the most popular content. Like I'll spend like the series I just did, I digested the International Olympic Committee's article from 2016 on like measuring athlete training and competition load and how much is too much and how much to progress and all this stuff. Like pretty nerdy stuff. Made like 5 posts out of it, a couple good charts and stuff. Worst performing content I've put up in months. Absolutely terrible. But like a single witty sentence with a cool background, or like a video of split squats, like whatever, you're good.
I'm not going to name names or anything, but we were TDY recently, some folks on my team, and we were told by someone in a leadership position that what we need more than anything is a TikTok.
I've been told the same.
And we're not going to do that, but it was, again, one of those moments in a brief where you're just like, really? That's what we're, okay.
You should have brought up measures of effectiveness.
You're right. I should have said, sir or ma'am, I do this podcast. You may have heard of it. Anyway, Sam, introduce yourself, please.
All right, I'm Sam. I'm a performance dietitian by trade, currently in Tucson, Arizona, working on Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I cover the wing and our Air Force Special Warfare population. Every day looks different. All things.
You skipped over the whole pre-part, though.
I thought you just meant like where I'm at currently.
No. Introduce yourself, Sam.
I've never, given a lengthy background.
Sam played sports in college. That's what we're trying to get at. That's how she's qualified.
Do you want me to say that? Like that I all the way back to when I played sports?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Should I
Anything
say
that makes people believe the stuff you say.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Sam. I'm from New Jersey. Currently living in Tucson, Arizona, where I'm the performance dietitian on Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I cover the wing and specifically the rescue group and our Air Force Special Warfare population, to include A-10 squadrons as well. Did my undergrad and played college soccer at University of Rhode Island back in the glory days. Did my grad degree at Florida State under Dr. Ormsby, where I did some thesis research on pre-sleep feeding and the impact it has on metabolism. Was also able to swing, hopping over to Australia for a little bit and supporting some research under Dr. Louise Burke over at the Australian Institute of Sport, which was really awesome. Post-grad school, I got a gig under Dr. Adam Strang in the Strong Lab at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which was essentially exercise physiology lab, and I held the role of half researcher, half dietitian. So we did a lot of research relative to tech, wearable technology, training programs. We did a pretty cool float tank study while I was there as well. Great people over there. And from that position, most recently, had moved down to here in Tucson. So I've been here in Tucson about a little over 2 years now.
Nice.
So if you can't tell by why we just had her walk through the whole thing, Sam's qualified to talk about food and supplements, and Alex and I will be asking her dumb questions about food and supplements, because that's mostly where the barriers are, I think, with regards to human performance and nutrition.
Yeah, I think we overcomplicate it. I think those are good, definitely good topics, but at the end of the day, I think it's all very overcomplicated.
So I was thinking about this before we were talking. So as a strength coach, one of the things you run up against working with your average athlete is that there's so much training information online that they just assume that, like, okay, I hear what you're saying, that's cool, but I'm gonna do this thing because I saw it on Instagram or whatever. I would think, and I have seen this, where nutrition is even worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think what would complete the puzzle right now, or at least this discussion, would be having some sort of psych or mental health to tell us how human behavior works. Because at the end of the day, I feel like it's so common. I think with training too, you believe the qualified practitioner, what they're telling you, but there's just so much stimulus coming from the internet or an app or a new diet or whatever it is. And you're like just after the next new big thing, because fundamentally we're all just trying to get better. So they're like, any chance you think you're behind, you're going to jump ship.
Dang, I only came to this podcast prepared with like one really good question, and we already just like skipped straight over it.
What's your one really good question, please?
Well, so as background, I get a ton of nutrition related questions on the page, and I have not done a great job answering them. I've talked a little bit about nutrition on the page, but since I'm not a qualified practitioner in that space, I would much rather have some of these answers come from somebody who is. but you kind of said it when you said that we overcomplicate it. But I don't figure out how to get people to care. And I guess my question is how do we do that? Because that seems like the biggest hurdle, not teaching them macronutrient distribution ranges or whatever, like identifying micronutrient deficiencies. I think we just have to get them to care and take care of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very convoluted topic in itself. I mean, that begins with behavior change and the theories of motivation, and always comes back to what's the why behind why you're trying to do something. Do you even have a why? That's a really common one that I've been trying to incorporate more personally in my consults, is asking someone when they come in my door and they're like, I want to be 10% body fat, or I want to go paleo, or I want to do X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, well, why? Like, what's the intent? What are you actually going for? And then you're kind of peeling back a bunch of layers to figure out, A, is that what they actually want to do? Or B, are they just trying to, get that extra, I don't know what kind of example to give in that situation, but figuring out the why behind it is a big one. But when it comes to motivation, I think that one's super interesting because, like you said, you can tell people, I can have two people sitting in front of me. Someone's super motivated because of maybe they recently found out they have family history of something, or maybe they're training up for an assessment, or maybe they just got some labs back that they're not too happy about, or I don't know, maybe they turned 30 and they're like, actually, I want to pay attention to this. And then you have someone else that's just like, oh, I read this cool thing on the internet. What?
I'm sitting here at 32. Like, what do you mean?
I just meant like a turning point. Like, I feel like when people hit something with a zero at the end, it's a turning point in their life. But you can give people the same content, absolute same word for word verbatim consult, come back in 2 months. One person has dropped maybe 15 pounds. The other person's exactly the same. And it's like, well, I did, 50% of what I was supposed to do. So as much as we'd like to make a difference, it really depends on the person to take control of that. I think we can absolutely help them see why it's important to make those changes. Even things like lab values, for example, printing out as easy as like a lipid panel, or, printing out a deficiency and saying, hey, this is what's going on inside your body right now. This is how we can fix it with nutrition, and sort of personalize it to them. That creates a ton of buy-in, which I think happens a lot with some of the wearable technology too. But I mean, that's a double-edged sword too, because sometimes it's a little bit of overload. But
you kind of started getting after it there, but do you have any particular tactics that you found effective in terms of having those conversations? The one I use this as an example all the time, but it seems like showing people the correlation between sleep deprivation and reduced testosterone levels terrifies them, especially men in the military. So it's great to hit them with that if you want to change their sleep behavior. Are there similar tactics that you use in the nutrition space to like get them there?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy, the way I approach things and the way I practice is really through education. So similar to what you're doing, I try not to use any like tactics, quote unquote, but really I just use education. So for example, if it's someone that's wants to decrease body comp, because that's a really typical one, we'll start breaking it down and be like, okay, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for your immune system? What does this mean for your performance? What does this mean for your longevity? What does this mean for your career performance? And start breaking it down and educating the impact of making those decisions, and maybe making those decisions and having an acute impact and acute deficit in performance, for example, is worth it for whatever long-term result we're after. So I would say education, but honestly, really dialing in and kind of forcing people to think about what is the intent and what is the true underlying why behind something. Because that also is I think that's going to help them stick with it too in the long term. I think there's plenty of data out there that says if people have more intrinsic motivation around a specific goal, they're going to have a much better outcome than people that are focused on those extrinsic motivators. I'm also a little bit of like a hippie spirit world energy universe person. And I truly believe that it has to be the right time for people. Like, I think at all points we're learning something, even if you don't feel like you're in the best spot in your life where you feel like you could be better at X, Y, and Z. I feel like every moment you're learning a specific lesson, whether or not you realize it tomorrow or 10 years from now, you're going through a phase of life that's helping you get to a certain point. So we can use education to make the best choices we can possible, but by no means are they going to be, perfect, quote unquote. But I think it's always right for the person at that time. You got to meet people where they're at, in like a less hippie way to put it.
Okay, I'm writing down things, more tangible type stuff. But I know when people hear, oh, we're talking to a dietitian, the questions immediately are going to be like, what supplements should I take? So in terms of, okay, so here's the theme for these next couple. The first and most simple change you would recommend making to achieve the goal, which will make sense in a second. So smallest change for biggest return. Ready? So if someone comes to you and wants to lose fat, for example, lose weight, in your mind, tangibly speaking, what are and it doesn't even have to be one, let's say like 1 to 3,
I already have it. I'm ready.
Drew, are you asking for quick fixes and hacks?
Yeah, and I'm asking for a friend. I'm not asking just for the people.
We're all here for the people.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's not going to be easy because I don't think a lot of these things are necessarily easy. However, I think the biggest bang for your buck is added sugars. Maybe not necessarily omitting them, but limiting them significantly.
Okay, so when I first heard that, I thought you said add more sugar, and I thought that can't be right.
Yeah, we would have to turn the podcast off.
Yeah, you're saying, what are those guys doing in the Air Force? Take away added sugars.
Limit them. So maybe not necessarily take them all out, but at least limit them if you want to do a week where you take them all out just to, give it a go. But that does a couple things. Added sugar, which just for definition, just what it sounds like, any sugar that's been added to the product after processing. So real or natural sugar, things that are naturally occurring in fruits, vegetables, grains, plain yogurt, things like that, totally fine. No worries. Anything that's been added to the product, that's what we're talking about in this sense.
Real quick, am I correct in thinking, because I look on nutrition labels, that has to be noted, right?
So in the new labels, it is noted, but some products haven't fully swapped over. Yeah. But in most new products, it'll list added sugars.
Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. But that'll force a couple things because at that point now, you're ideally emphasizing more whole foods because you want to just avoid added sugars to begin with. So you're not even picking anything up with a label. And if you are picking something up with a label, now you're forced to read the label and actually read what ingredients are in there. So it's causing more awareness. I think a lot of the time we're just unaware of how much we're actually consuming on a day-to-day basis. So biggest bang for your buck, for sure. Maybe not for sure. I mean, I'm sure other people would have other things to say, but I think that's a huge one.
Added sugar. What do you, just as a tangent, because I think about this every time I go to the grocery store, it's incredibly frustrating. For example, trying to find peanut butter that just has peanuts in it. What are some common food items you see? And Alex, actually, as somebody who has been in the Army, you may be familiar with some of these in the DFAC, but what are some common food items you see where they have added sugar that you wouldn't really realize unless you flip the thing over to look?
Yeah, great question.
Well, I'll tell you what, I did exactly what you were saying with like removing added sugars for a while, and like specifically not picking any like sugar sweetened beverages was like the first step I took. And I remember because I was a lieutenant, I was at Fort Carson, I went to the commissary and I went through like everything in the beverage aisle, and there weren't options available that weren't sugar sweetened. They just were not. You could buy bottled water, and that was the end of the list of options.
Yeah, that's also a really good point and a really good one. You could almost say before added sugars, you could say just don't drink calories, because that's also a really common one too. And not necessarily considering like a high nutrient quality, calorically dense smoothie, but like a frappuccino.
Oh, yeah. Coconut water. Or what's the Body Armor? Sorry, don't name brands, but
I mean, yeah, but once we start getting into things like that are marketed, maybe not marketed.
We're sponsored by Body Armor, so.
Oh, really? I mean, it's a decent.
He's manifesting sponsorships for the podcast right now.
And
They say it, they have to do it.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Like when you're talking about movement and like training and whatever, it's definitely not a terrible choice. I wouldn't consider it a fantastic sports drink with its electrolyte makeup, but when we're comparing, a bunch of different name brands, context is important. You're sitting at your desk. Yeah, no.
Okay, so decrease fat, you're saying look out for the added sugars, things like peanut butter, salad dressing, I know is one that comes up.
Bread is a really common one. Yogurt, people think they're being really healthy by eating yogurt and granola. Granola, unfortunately, is a really big one that I find kind of crushes people's souls. The amount of sugar is in granola. Cereal, huge one.
Sports bars.
Condiments, yeah, energy bars. The thing with energy bars is they'll get away from they'll decrease being able to have to say added sugars by adding like sugar alcohols or fake sugars or alternative sweeteners or something. So they don't have to list added sugar. So you can look at the label and see 0 and think it's healthy, but it's got maybe like 5 to 10 grams of sugar alcohols, which we know is going to impact gut microbiome, which is going to have plenty of downstream effects as well. So it's kind of like, which is worse?
Yeah, we're also sponsored by Cliff Bar, but I know that that's another one that sneaks up on people because they have like a wrapper made out of cardboard and there's a dude hanging off a cliff and it seems really sporty, but it's basically your Three Musketeers.
Well, they stopped sponsoring all the athletes doing really hardcore outdoor stuff, so they're not cool anymore.
Well, they haven't stopped sponsoring us. Let's shut up. Okay, so decrease fat. Any stone unturned there? I mean, I know there's a bajillion stones unturned, but we feel good about that. I'm working down my list.
Yeah, I would say don't drink your calories, limit or just omit added sugar, but pretty much pay attention to it.
So that brings up another question, and I know I'll get to the next topic in a second, but I have always heard, and I've done this with folks that I've worked with, where you don't want to change, you don't want to make a massive change. You want to just replace don't change anything you're eating, just instead of having that Coke with lunch, have like a water.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of folks get into this thinking, holy shit, if I try to change myself, I'm going to have to like throw away all my food or whatever.
75 hard and whole 30. And
I got it. And that's too much. That's like, no pun intended, but that's a little bit too much to bite off with one chew or whatever.
You want to try that again?
I don't want to chew with one bite.
Bit off more than you can chew.
More than you can chew. Yeah. There you go. No pun intended.
That's funny.
God, that one escaped me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And at the end of the day, I'm always trying to add things versus take things away. So when you ask me for like number 1, instead of saying avoid added sugars, you can say add whole foods, not the store, but like foods in their whole form.
I was just talking to a physical therapist at the 82nd who was talking about how they try and show soldiers what they can do rather than tell them what they can't do when they're experiencing an injury. And I think a similar philosophy for nutrition of like, hey, focus on eating these things rather than telling yourself you can't eat the following things.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's plenty of science behind that too. The brain is super fascinating that as soon as you say you can't have something, now it's hyper focused on it the whole time. And you're just going to be thinking about it the whole time, which nobody wants to do. And it's not a healthy relationship with nutrition anyway. So I completely agree with that. Focusing on things that you can add and incorporate in that are naturally going to offset those other things. Instead of saying avoid added sugars, even though that is very important, increase whole food options.
All right, let's flip the script. I come to you. I want to get jacked. I want to increase lean body mass. I want to build muscle. What's the first thing?
Probably talk to the strength coach.
Oh, get out of here. I've already done that. He says, go talk to the dietitian.
Awesome. Well, in that sense, probably just get an understanding of what they're eating, because of course, calorie intake is fundamental in that equation. Make sure people are eating enough. And it could just come down to meal frequency, increasing meal frequency to get people to eat more. Arguably, gaining weight for some people is most people is more difficult than losing weight, because having to eat past the point that you're actually full and kind of going against your body cues like that, it's a tough thing, because we want them to be engaged and intuitive with their hunger cues, fullness cues. But in this situation, it's like, sorry, you just got to eat and there's no way around it.
That brings up an interesting, maybe this is a story about me, maybe not, but why does your body start to sweat when you eat a ton of meat?
Well, I think that's person specific too. I think you're referring to the meat sweats.
I've heard it called that in some circles.
Well, so protein.
That's something you study in dietitian school.
Yeah, actually.
My PhD's in meat sweats.
It could be. It very well could be. The quick lowdown would be the concept of diet-induced thermogenesis, which is essentially macronutrients are each going to be broken down by the body, and it's going to energetically cost more. So protein and carbohydrate are about 4 calories per gram, whereas fat is about 9 calories per gram. So sometimes it just takes a little more energy to do things.
So you're saying,
I didn't think we were going thermic effective food on this podcast.
well, see, if you eat enough to overheat yourself, you start sweating. It's a real problem. But it came to mind when you said that it's hard to gain muscle mass because you basically do have to eat past the point of being full.
Yeah, and that might not be like, I don't know if that's actually linked with the meat sweats or not, but maybe.
Can that be the
We're just trying to stay warm for the winter.
Yeah.
I think when we put this out, that should be the sound clip we record, is that this is a podcast about the meat sweats. We'll get a lot of action.
Have Liver King dial in and tell us about his meat sweats all day.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
I went down a Liver King rabbit hole last week. Oh God. Oh no.
Oh my goodness.
There are multiple meme pages like just dedicated to him. Like they run a whole page just by posting his content sarcastically.
Sam, can you, I think I have thrown this to you before in a text or something, but the more I say it, the more I think it's right, which is probably not healthy. Would you say that quantity determines size, but quality determines shape with regards to what you eat and how you look? And if that's right, feel free to take it.
So no, I don't think that's right, only because I don't think you can simplify it down to that level.
Oh, come on.
Essentially, you're now entering yourself into the debate of calories in, calories out versus adaptive metabolism, and that's can't really be simplified.
Well, so let's talk about that. Kiko, calories in, calories out. What does that mean?
Essentially, so similar to what you just said, the concept of regardless of the quality of food, if the amount of calories you're taking in is less than the amount of calories you're burning, whether it's through actual physical activity or just basic metabolic needs and fidgeting and walking around and stuff like that, if calories in is less than calories out, you will lose weight. If it's the same, you'll maintain weight. If it's more, you'll gain weight. But that avoiding or not considering the quality of the food doesn't consider the impact that the food has on things like, for example, the microbiome, which the impact it has on inflammation, which inflammation has on ability to lose weight or lose fat. So quality of food absolutely matters.
The one that catches me on that one, and I've put some content on Mops and Mo's about it, is when you look at the composition of the weight lost or gained, like how much of it is fat and how much of it is muscle, and like the health consequences during those periods and things like that. I think people would be really surprised, like if you're losing weight purely by being in a calorie deficit and not worrying about the quality of the food and also not training, like potentially a majority of the weight you lose is muscle, not just like a significant quantity, but like more than half.
Yeah.
Awareness of that, I think, is pretty important in terms of getting people to care about the quality of the food they're consuming and their sleep and their training and all that stuff too.
100% agree. Yeah, I think we really need to get away from the idea of calories and sort of trying to boil it down to okay, I have to eat something that's only 200 calories, because if it's 250, I'm over, and that's gonna, cause bad things. Because there's so many limitations to begin with. I mean, the calorie amount of a food is already an estimate, and the calorie counting that we're doing is another estimate. And now we're just compounding estimates the whole time and trying to get down to the gram when the gram is already not even accurate.
This gets to a question that I was about to do a post on for Mops and Mo's actually. So I've been asking a bunch of dietitians this question just to like get their take on it. Do you track your like calorie and macronutrient intake? And do you use that as a tool with your clients or patients?
A lovely answer in nutrition of it depends. So the short answer is no, I don't track my own calories. However, I will if I'm either transitioning into like a different type of diet intake, or maybe I want to lose and or gain or something. So sometimes I'll just check in. I feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of what a gram or calorie amount per carb, fats, proteins, just because I've been looking at it my whole life. So I feel like I can estimate pretty accurately, but it's still good to, from an awareness standpoint, to do it every now and then to kind of check in. So sometimes I'll do that. However, I also really enjoy the concept of intuitive eating and mindful eating and think there's a lot of value in that. So I tend to lean a little bit heavier on that end of the spectrum, which does not count calories. And then in practice, 99% of the time, I'm not giving out a meal plan or a macro plan or telling people to track these things. However, when I first meet with someone, if it's my first time chatting with them, I do ask them to track their food for at least a couple days so they can get the awareness of what is a carb, fat, protein, how much are you actually eating. Usually it's way less or way more than what they actually think. It's a good way to point out added sugars too. So from an awareness and informational and educational standpoint, I'll use it. Or if someone walks in my door and was like, look, I am so sold on macros, they are the answer. Sweet, I will absolutely help you dial them in based on what we know. So, I mean, it's perfectly fine to use it, but I don't think it's necessary to use it.
I love that answer because that's almost identical to the answer I've gotten from every other dietitian I've asked. It seems like macro tracking is like essentially in like the performance world used as a spot check. And that's how I've used it myself. I don't think I've ever done it for longer than like 2 weeks because it's a lot of work. And I think it's kind of unrealistic to expect most people to do that. It's a ton of time. It's a ton of effort. It's a ton of focus that is just excess forced into it. And I think as far as I can tell, the only community that really consistently uses it as a tool all the time is like the bodybuilding world. Mm-hmm. It's kind of about it. But because people think bodybuilding is fitness, and so many like service members, so many people in general train like they're bodybuilders, even though they're not, I think that bleeds into it. The nutrition aspect of bodybuilding gets stuck up with the whole like fitness approach people have.
Yeah.
You want to talk about nutrition obsessives, the CrossFit world. I remember for the level 1 one of the answers was like how many almonds equals this many blocks or something. And
zone diet, right?
Exactly. And counting almonds is the joke people use. But I think you glossed over a massively important point about this, which is the fact that like, even if you have, shameless plug, MyFitnessPal, and you put
another sponsor.
Yeah, we're sponsored by them too. You put banana and it gives you the number. Like, you got to trace the banana back to like what kind of soil, what kind of climate did that thing grow in? Because that's really where it starts in terms of how many calories is in that thing. Like, do you weigh the peel? Do you not weigh the peel? Like, blah, 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 blah. So yes, if you're the type of person who's simultaneously telling me that you care so much about macros, but then also are counting your almonds without recognizing that like that's a total wag in terms of what MyFitnessPal is saying for the calorie number, it just doesn't. Another food pun, the juice doesn't really seem to be worth the squeeze in that sense.
Great job, Drew. This is incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The food pun game is strong. Would you say that, so back to, I think Alex made this point on the performance side, because in doing a lot more endurance training for myself, would you say that the number, especially when we think of like carbohydrates and that sort of thing from a performance standpoint, is something that you do want numbers behind? And I'm going to segue this into like tactically speaking, longer missions, rucking, et cetera, looking at fueling, that type of stuff, then we do tend to look at numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I was also just going to say before too, like it really just depends on the context. It's absolutely a tool that is very helpful in certain contexts. But when we're talking general health or general fitness or, you know, anything related to that, it's going to look totally different than we're looking at, you know, long duration fueling. Because at that point, yes, we are going for a specific range.
So next question on that, and this is kind of back to my archetypes for folks that, like, I get this question a lot on the strength side of things. People suffering from the inability to go long, especially with like some longer selection events, longer rucks, that sort of thing, like bonking is kind of what they run into. So what are some nutritional strategies there? Just again, some quick hits on how to improve performance in that realm.
Quick hits. Let's see, if I were to pick 3 of the most important things you could do. Practice before the event. So essentially practice eating while training. So it's not that you're showing up to this event and it's the first time you're having to eat while doing something. Training the gut is a huge, huge piece of a lot of these selection events, and really will, I mean, honestly, will make it like a huge make or break difference in some situations. Because if you run out of fuel and you bonk in the middle of a ruck, like that could easily be what pulls you out, and is completely avoidable by fueling appropriately. So first thing I would say is to practice before. And that also means different types of carbohydrates, amounts of carbohydrates. Roughly, this is getting into the numbers, but roughly we want minimum 30 grams of carbohydrate up to 60. Some people, some higher level endurance athletes can tolerate 90 grams an hour. Really, we aren't pushing that bill too much. At least I don't see the need in the work that I do here. So trying to stay within that 30 to 60, maybe 75 grams of carbs per hour. And then depending on the duration, throwing in fats and proteins for sustainment. But you want to train the gut to be able to utilize that fuel, because when we're training, not all the blood, but most of the blood is now going to shunt away from our gut and digestion into the muscles that are doing the work. So it's going to make digestion harder, which is why we rely on simple sugars that are easier to digest during training. So like waffles or bars or gels or chews. So those are much easier for the body to break down and utilize as energy, which is why we rely on them during training.
Do you think so now I'm thinking in terms of more gen pop type folks who may be training for like a PT test. Do you think there's how do I phrase this? Like an event time under which special nutrition may not necessarily make a difference, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I'd say if it's less than 45 minutes, fluids is probably main priority at that point. Fluids in the pre-training meal. I mean, depending on what they've eaten the day before too, there's a lot that'll go into it, but roughly speaking, gen pop, less than 45 minutes, fluids are probably fine.
Okay. And longer than that, you would say now we would want to think about carbohydrates, electrolytes.
Correct. Yeah, and I would say from 45 to 60 or 90 minutes, we're looking at the lower end of the range, like 30-ish grams per carb, above 90, 60 grams per carb of carb per hour.
I was just going to let you go with that.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a metric I've never heard of.
The carb.
Carbs per grams.
Yeah. Hydration is a big one too, electrolyte intake. But I'd say biggest thing honestly is practicing fueling during and making sure to eat enough during.
So we're dancing around it, and I know we don't want to take up hours and hours talking about it, but supplements. In the tactical space, what do you think is worth the money? I think we've all seen people spending a ton of money on like your pre-workouts, your BCAAs,
I was blown away, by the way, being at Bragg last week at the amount of supplements for sale in like every convenience location on that installation. There's a whole aisle. Like you walk into a gas station, they're going to sell you booze and supplements. You walk into like a mini mall with like a couple little restaurants, booze and supplements everywhere.
When you went through the gate, did the security guys not hand you a shot of pre-workout?
They must have been slacking. They must have ran out that morning.
Maybe that's a 6 a.m. thing. Yeah, every morning you get the pre-workout shot and you're ready to roll.
Do we have a pre-workout sponsor that we want to plug for the podcast?
Yeah. I was trying to think of a brand, but I have legitimately not taken pre-workout probably since high school. I can't even think of. I was going to say Black Coffee. We're sponsored by coffee.
Yeah, coffee is fantastic.
Yeah, coffee is what keeps us going.
I did. This will keep you happy, Drew. I had my first coffee in like 3 weeks this morning.
So, okay. So Alex did sober January. What is it called? Dry January?
Dry January. And then I decided to throw in caffeine as well. So
yeah, but then his jump back into the real world was tea. I was like, how many times in your life, I guess unless you do it every January, do you get the chance to start from a blank slate with caffeine where you can just experience that?
I do it like twice a year, but
I heard
everybody's so like addicted to it that they're not actually feeling it whenever they consume it, right? You have to go off to get like the full experience when you come back. You're just not a big enough junkie yet.
I won't again name names, but I've seen guys put pre-workout in coffee, which is that's a big move.
That's pretty incredible. I tried. I mean, I can't even make it 7 days. I should try again. You're inspiring me.
It's all about the slow taper when you come off. Yeah. The two strategies I've used is either buy like a jug of the pre-made iced coffee and like measure a smaller amount each day for a week. Hey, we're getting whatever. This is what I do. I'm a nerd.
Hey, did you meal prep? No, but I freaking laid out my coffee.
And then the one I did this time, which was the first time I'd done it, was like mixing an increasing ratio of decaf grounds into the coffee, and then just brewing the same amount of coffee but more decaf.
Yeah, I guess my struggle with it is it's not the caffeine. It's not keeping me awake by any means. Like relatively, like energy levels are typically fine. It's just coffee. It's just so good.
It's really good.
Coffee.
Maybe living in Europe, like when I lived in the UK, you'd have coffee after dinner, and maybe that's what did it. But like, it doesn't give me a jolt. It's just the whole like, oh, it smells good, and like it's coffee.
So desensitized, yeah.
It is. This like work from home life has definitely changed some of my habits, and I did keep drinking decaf coffee while I was off caffeine this time. I haven't done that in the past, but like I've started stocking like biscotti in my house, and I know this is supposed to be a nutrition podcast, like no added sugars and stuff, but like a cup of coffee and one of the little biscotti things.
Well, I mean, we're sponsored by biscotti, so we're obligated.
And it's all about being a human being. That's all about the longevity of it.
Well, and that's the ad script. Biscotti, be a human being. To supplements. What do you think? What supplements? Let's sum it up in one question. What supplements are worth it, Sam?
Creatine, monohydrate. We'll just go with that one.
That's it. Just creatine.
Yeah. So you could also throw, I think, protein powder. I honestly like to look at it like a plain whey protein or a casein or something as just a broken down food at that point. So it is a supplement, but it's also like it's meeting your food goals as well. So creatine monohydrate, protein powder, all third-party verified, definitely, hands down. And then I would say these aren't absolutely necessary, but then from there, pending if you have any nutrition deficiencies or nutrient deficiencies, you want to get those taken care of. Common ones are vitamin D, really common. Sometimes iron, but mostly vitamin D. So if you have a deficiency there, and then honestly, it's safe enough to just take 500 IUs, 1,000 IUs a day indefinitely. So every now and then I'll do like twice a week at some point, I'll just pop some extra vitamin D. But I'm also trying to go outside a lot.
So you live in Tucson, which is basically on the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really depends. because we're not getting it at all. I mean, there's some in food, but the bioavailability of it is pretty low. And now that we know so much more about soil quality, like you were mentioning before, we're really not getting a ton of it through food. So sun is our main source of it, which is why supplementation is going to be the best way to bump that up.
So creatine, would you say creatine for male and female?
Yeah, male and female. Tons of really awesome stuff coming out more recently about the impact or the preventative benefit of creatine on brain-related health. Because creatine, thinking about it, it's an energy substrate. It's kind of the first step in energy production. So anywhere where in the body where energy systems are being taxed mentally, that's happening a ton. So creatine is really crucial for things like that, as well as post-concussion when there's tons of energy flux going on in the brain.
So basically creatine, protein, and then for the endurance type folks, looking at carbs and electrolytes.
Yeah, I would say creatine and protein, and then to a lesser extent, because again, I don't think these are absolutely necessary, but they can be helpful. Omega-3 is probably pretty high up there. Vitamin D, pretty high up there. Performance specific, I would say nitrates, beta alanine. Recovery specific, curcumin's a really good one. Collagen, really good one. Recovery specific, doesn't do shit for you before bed, wasting more money than the brain.
That's what I was just going to ask. I think sleep is the next big thing people are looking to supplement around, because I mean, fitness has obviously been one for forever, but I'm seeing a lot more with sleep. Are there any supplements, or I mean, we could even say foods, really, strategies nutritionally around getting better sleep?
Yeah, I feel like there's plenty of strategies, but a lot of them are lifestyle strategies, behavior change strategies. From a food standpoint, there's been research done about macronutrient composition, is higher carb or higher fat or less calories or more calories. I think, well, the research is inconclusive to begin with. And then just from a personal, like individual standpoint, people are going to react differently all the time. Some people feel like they sleep better when they have casein before bed, for example. Some people feel like they're digesting all night and they can't sleep. So it's really individually specific. But I think the lifestyle and behavior changes are more impactful than any nutrition specific interventions. But I mean, chamomile tea like that can be helpful. Tart cherry juice, natural source of melatonin. Most of the time, we don't want people supplementing with melatonin unless we're trying to realign circadian rhythms.
Damn it.
Just taking that. So I think the stuff relative to, are you moving throughout the day? Are you seeing sunlight in the morning? Are you limiting screens before bed? What's the temperature? What's the environment? Are you stressed? Are you journaling? Are you managing? All those things are way more important.
So don't just drink chamomile and snort a melatonin.
Correct. Oh, huge one that we're missing is alcohol. Alcohol absolutely inhibits adequate quality sleep. Essentially what alcohol does, this is a big one for our performance community. It pulls us out of that deepest level of sleep where all muscle recovery is occurring overnight. So even if we're having just a couple drinks and we don't necessarily feel like we're getting drunk, the process that the body has to go through to metabolize that is both, I mean, it's taking metabolism away from the food we're eating, but it's also impacting sleep quality, which has huge compound effect and huge implications on recovery from a training standpoint.
Well, and two, this shocked me when I started getting into like nutrition stuff. Alcohol is a sort of macronutrient.
Yeah, I mean, it's got calories.
7 calories per gram, I think, or is it 9? 7.
Seven.
Yeah.
Seven.
It's
So
got calories and it's got to be metabolized.
Yeah, that was in the curriculum for the Master Fitness Trainer course. It's like how many calories per gram of each thing, and then you talk about alcohol as a macronutrient. And I think that was usually an opportunity I took to remind people that like the way those numbers are developed is by burning it in a fire. And as much as we say burning calories, like there's not actually a furnace in your stomach, and that's not exactly how it works. And alcohol is also just literally poison. So like I still drink, right? Like, but people should understand the consequences of the decision they're making and like make an informed decision. And I think the sleep issue with alcohol is a pretty big one. So
well, I say that less from a lifestyle standpoint and more from when people come to you. And I've had this happen a lot with guys where they're like, I eat like all I eat is salad. I train all the time. Like I drink a ton of beer, and they don't realize that those are calories too, and that's probably why you're still fat. Usually don't phrase it that way, but that's the gist of it. We do not have any alcohol sponsors. I'll throw that out.
We have principles here. We'll get pre-workout sponsors, but we won't get alcohol sponsors.
We're gentlemen of principle. We've turned down more alcohol sponsors. Anything else.
It's all about moderation, balance. I love a good craft brewery, glass of wine, just like the next person, but it's all about overall quantity and just, again, intention.
Yeah, and Alex loves planning out his coffee intake a week in advance. We all have advice.
I prep out my alcohol intake too. I have it all laid out.
Just in the fridge, like that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
How did you feel omitting alcohol for a month? Like, did you feel totally different?
So like, since I did both at the same time, it's hard to attribute how much comes from lack of alcohol and how much comes from lack of caffeine. And part of it is I didn't drink that much in the first place, like maybe 1 or 2 nights a week and maybe a couple drinks, like nothing where I was like detoxing heavily or something.
Yeah.
But I think largely because like the times I would have a drink or two were like pretty close to right before bed, I can probably attribute the fact that I experienced way better sleep quality this month to some of that. But it also comes back to what you said, like the biggest thing that affects my sleep quality is like cell phone use in the evening. And like I keep moving towards like plugging my phone in farther and farther away from my bedroom. So like my bedroom is down that hallway back there, and I'll plug my phone in this room. And like it's hooked up to speakers that'll play music to wake me up. And that way there's like no devices come to my bedroom. And that seems to make a way bigger impact. And
Yeah.
Drew's laughing at me for caring about my health again.
I was picturing you plugging your phone into some sound system before you go to bed so that your freaking apartment shakes time to wake up. And I'm also picturing you losing sleep so you can come up with some fire Instagram content. Mops and Mo's ruining Alex's health because he's trying to get fresh content out to the people.
Yeah. How ironic.
Oh man. No, I strictly do all my Mops and Mo stuff during working hours. Shh. That's not true. I swear it's not true. That's a joke. It's satire for everybody listening.
We're also
I do get all my ideas during working hours though. People like frequently ask like where I get the ideas for the content, and it's literally just conversations I'm having at work.
Yeah.
let's do a
It resonates.
Real life.
let's do, because we should probably do more than one recording with Sam on nutrition because there's a lot to dive into. Let's do a rapid fire round to close it out. I'm gonna come up with random questions. If you guys have any random questions you want to come up with, Alex, if anything comes to mind, pop in.
This is like Brene Brown's podcast.
I've never listened to
The
it.
real thing.
She's famous, so hopefully that's, yeah, we're sponsored by Brene. Ready?
Yeah.
Biggest nutrition myth.
I'm having a brain fart.
I'm the biggest nutrition.
Biggest nutrition myth. I mean, I haven't heard it in a while, but that you can only digest like 20 grams of protein at a meal or something. Oh, you know what? No. How about if you don't eat like or drink a protein shake immediately after training, you'll lose your gains. That's still, I feel like that's still pretty well followed.
So is the anabolic window real or not?
Not real.
It's in the Bible.
Or actually, I guess we can't say it's not real. It's not as slim as we thought it was previously.
That was a good nutrition pun. It's not as slim as we thought it was.
Yeah.
I'm still doing post-workout glycogen replenishment with my morning biscotti after my cardio.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's very important. Post-training nutrition is very important, but it's not as necessary to just crush a protein shake when your foot is halfway out of the gym.
Next question. What's one thing you've changed your mind on that you used to think was like fact?
Oh, that's an awesome question.
I think I stole that from a different podcast.
Yeah, that's an awesome question.
Something you've changed your mind on.
That I've changed my mind. There's got to be plenty. I just can't think.
I'll drop a lead. It's for me, and again, I'm not a dietitian, but in the performance space, I think I was a big macro person for a long time, and I have moved sort of away from that towards
Really?
not, well, like you and I having conversations around like Ironman type stuff, that's a little different because like we talked about the endurance and that sort of thing. But I'm like you, I'll check in occasionally. However, I'm not weighing, like, I don't know if you remember, I used to have a pocket scale.
Oh, I have one. I have one.
Yeah. I'm not weighing almonds at work anymore. I used to be that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll support you. I'll support anybody and where they're trying to go, but I'll gently nudge you to do the, maybe something that's better.
All right, you have one, go.
Probiotics. I used to think, I mean, granted, we're getting tons of new information about gut health all the time, but probably pretty close to like 5 years ago at this point, I was getting super into gut health, and I essentially sent out mass text messages to my family and was like, everyone needs to be on a probiotic. Go get one now. This is the best thing you could do. Everybody's gut needs help. Which, I mean, everybody's gut might need some help, but a probiotic is absolutely not the right answer for everybody, and they should be utilized in specific situations. So strain specific probiotics for certain outcomes that you're going for. So that's something I've gone back on. That used to be in my like top supplements to take, probiotic. And now I'm like, nope.
Brilliant.
So something, just because like we're on the topic and I like it, I think one that's really common that I went through is like a new member of the Army that I think a lot of young, especially guys in the Army, go through, is thinking that like getting bigger is a crucial component of getting stronger. Like a lot of guys early on are obsessed with just like getting huge. So they eat like crap and lift a lot, and it like kind of in the big picture damages their fitness. That's been the biggest one for me, at least.
You are ruining my rapid fire round.
That's a really good one. When you can't tie your shoes or walk around the building without heavily breathing, you've gone too far.
I will ask her a pseudo rapid fire question, because she talked about probiotics and gut microbiome and stuff, and I was super curious about it because she brought it up earlier. But I've tried to read a little bit of the research on gut microbiome, and that seems extremely complicated. And it seems like we still don't really like understand it enough to say what is a good gut microbiome and what is a bad gut microbiome, and which bacteria are good and what ratios and all that stuff. So like we talk about it all the time. Are there some like best practices in terms of gut microbiome health? Because I haven't been able to like discern it when I try and read that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all your points. And that was actually a really good wrap up of the state of the literature right now. I think saying it in one word is we don't know actually. I mean, there's some things we know are bad. When you have like C. diff or something, we know that's bad. But at the end of the day, we don't know this is what the ideal microbiome looks like, not necessarily. But yes, there's absolutely good things. So essentially, probably the biggest things, it's food quality, what you're feeding your gut microbiome. So limiting added sugars, we know are pro-inflammatory, for example. Things that are anti-inflammatory, fiber, natural sources of fiber, fruits, veggies, whole grains, things like that are going to be very good for your gut.
What about fermented foods? Because that always comes up when you talk about microbiome.
Yeah, there's a pretty recent, it might have been last year at this point, that they are good for your microbiome. It was just more specific because they included kombucha. So it was one of like the few studies I feel like that actually have utilized kombucha. So yes, those things are actually making an impact.
The first and only time I drove with alcohol was kombucha. I bought the black label. I didn't know anything about kombucha. I didn't know that the black ones had alcohol in them. I thought I was just buying a kombucha. And
you mean like an actual hard kombucha?
Well, but that's the point. I didn't know that there were hard and
I gotcha.
soft. I just thought it was all
Thing now, man.
do what?
They make hard everything now. They'll spike any beverage and then sell it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm driving home drinking hard kombucha, and then I got, I was informed by someone that is in fact an alcoholic. Anyway,
That's
sponsored.
way funnier because I thought you meant regular kombucha, and that would have been super lame because it has like a very minute percentage of alcohol.
I'm a lightweight, but I can handle regular kombucha. Thank you. All right, rapid fire question. Ready for this? Do multivitamins work?
No.
Okay, that's all you get to say.
I know, that's gonna be the simple answer.
No. Okay. Can you outwork a bad diet?
It's really hard to answer things yes or no. Like there's so much, like it can help fill gaps in certain situations, but should we be taking it all the time? No, not really.
So you can't outwork a bad diet?
That was the still answer to my to the vitamin question.
Okay, so multi-vitamin question, not necessarily worth the money. You're saying?
No, but for example, when people are deploying and we have no idea what food quality is going to look like, that's a situation I recommend it.
Fair. And then last question of the night. Are abs made in the kitchen?
Some people genetically, yes.
Can
Well,
you make abs in the kitchen?
are abs made in the kitchen or can you outwork a bad diet? Those are different things, I think. So are abs made in the kitchen? Yes, but genetically, some people are just gifted and abs are made at Burger King.
So that's the sound clip we're gonna.
Not the messages we're trying to send.
Let's clip that sound bite. Abs are made at Burger King.
That is for sure the episode title, though.
Abs are made at Burger King. Perfect. Sponsored by Burger King. We wanna say I'd like to give a shout out to our title sponsor for tonight, Burger King. What's their motto?
That's a very good teaching point though, because abs are not a sign of health. Body comp is not a sign of health.
Hey, now we're just lying.
So if we really want to get into it, it's a poor question. It's a poor rapid fire question. We're not giving the people what they need to hear.
Well, that's what we're gonna have again.
I have all my cousin does all of like the graphic design stuff for Mops and Mo's, and I'm gonna have her put a little Burger King crown, like jauntily on top of the logo, and that's gonna be my new.
Have it your way. Is that Burger King? Is that Burger King's motto? Have it your way.
What are the army
I
bases?
think so. That's what I was thinking when you asked.
I think so.
What was your rapid fire question?
I think they have Burger Kings. Not all of them do.
Yeah, we have Burger Kings.
That's a whole different conversation around why the military wants to promote health, but the only foods you can find on post is like, yeah, that blows my mind. But
I mean, not even the military. Once we start talking
Oh, don't
about
worry. We're not sponsored. We're not sponsored by AFES, that's for sure.
yeah, not sponsored by the military. All right, we've gone on forever. Let's close out. Unless Alex, do you have anything else for Sam?
I do not have any rapid fire questions. I'm all set.
Okay, so abs are made at Burger King. Just put the ball on that, and we'll call it quits. Sam, thank you.
Yeah, great meeting you guys. Well, great meeting you, Alex.
You too. Thanks.
I've been waiting for a long time.